Welcome to channel AMAC, your insight to the Australian visa system. Good day everyone, my name is Carl Young, your online YouTube visa consultant. Are you interested about migrating to Australia? Why don't you consider to subscribe to my channel and turn on a little bell on the side, so once we have all the updates and new video, you'll be the first one getting all the notification. Now in this video, what we're going to discuss is in regards to, obviously, the international border has been opened for Australia. So a lot of people is eagerly to travel and enter and arrive in Australia. So how is it possible and is it easy to actually obtain employment sponsorships in order to get your visa and in order to migrate? It's actually a very hard question to answer, but I will try my best and obviously refer back to the actual visa criteria and regulation and see how that will fit. Now, giving you a scenario, a lot of people may leave comment and question in my email and things, asking whether or not they will meet this requirement to actually get the job. Now, answers to that is actually very, very hard. Now, if you're not in Australia, it's actually very hard. Why? Because the employer cannot confirm whether or not you have the work permit, whether or not you're eligible and lawful to be employed in Australia. Thus, it will be almost impossible to guarantee that even if the employer really likes you, that you actually get a job, because if you don't have any work permit, they are not likely to actually employ you. Now you may question, say, look, if they really like me, they can sponsor me, so I'll get a work permit. But then the question will throw back to the employer, say, well, why would I, as an employer, to spend all this money and process and legal procedures just to employ you, unless you are very, very important and your professional skill or your trade skill is extremely high, that could actually provide a huge value to that business. But if you're only just a generic worker, professional, why would the employer do that? Now anyway, let's jump into the immigration's website and have a look. Now here predominantly I've chosen to go for subclass 186 because generally this is what people will love to have, because 186 direct entry stream gives you permanent residency straight away. But let's have a look. Now, before you actually get into a job interview, if you're overseas or even if you are in Australia, still the same. It applies whether or not you're going to be overseas or onshore anyhow. So you need to be, obviously you need to have that occupation. Now secondly is these three is actually very important, because these three relates straight to whether or not you can actually work legally in Australia. So first of all is your work experience. Obviously you were testified to have that resume and been interviewed, but additional to that, if you want the visa, now Australian government require you to have that proven at least 3-year relevant work experiences, and obviously that's usually needs to go to skill assessment, and that's down here. You need to get a skill assessment. So again, it comes back to what I have been promoted over 3 years on my channel history, that without skill assessment, you want access to skill migration, you want access to your work visa, it's seemingly impossible. Even so, for example, if I'm the employer, I really love you to join our team to actually work in Australia, but if you don't have a skill assessment, even though you're probably a very highly skilled professional, I cannot even give you a visa. Okay, and that's the hard part. Now, some of the occupation required to be have the registration or license. For example, nurses, medical professionals, architects, engineers, they are required to have registration and licensing requirement. Without that, you cannot really employ them. So that is the first thing. That's the hardest part to actually have it. So again, going back to the question whether or not you can actually get a job while you're overseas and get an interview done, the answer is actually extremely hard. Extremely hard. Now, secondly, I want to show you this as well. Let's go back to the web page that we have. Now, on the top of myself, as you can see, there's a toggle button right up there. Ooh, right up there. Okay, now let's toggle that to sponsor. Now, again, the sponsor required to have approved their sponsorship application as well. Now, how do you know whether this employer will have their approved sponsorship? It's simply impossible. Now, we are here talking about direct entry. Now, that applies to 482 TSS visa as well. Now, if you're not sure, obviously you're looking for a big corporation. You may think big corporation may have sponsorship approved already. Sometimes that's just not true. They probably had before, but they haven't renewed it for years. So if they don't have that, they cannot even sponsor you as well. So again, the hard thing here obviously is all about if you're not in Australia, it's actually very hard. So how do you get a better view and better success rate on this one to get an employment sponsor? Obviously, you need to be in Australia. You need to be in Australia. So the higher success is that those ones who probably are coming to Australia with a work visa, for example, working holiday visa, or for example, they were an international student, graduated with a temporary graduate PSW work visa, so they're onshore in Australia, and they are in Australia, they got skill assessment done, and they found an employer likely to sponsor them. It's actually an easier way to go. So if you're overseas and you get job interview in Australia, are you able to be sponsored? The answer, I think it's even less than 50% of the chance, because they cannot confirm whether you got skill assessment, and they probably don't even know what skill assessment is all about, because the interviewer generally is not a visa specialist. And you yourself, how do you confirm the employer has the employment, the standard employer approval as well? It's actually very hard. Well, you don't ask the interviewer the first questions at whether or not you have a visa standard business sponsorship. You can sponsor me. Now, if I'm the interviewer, I probably will strike you out straight away if you ask that sort of questions. So it's actually very, very hard to actually get a job while you're not in Australia, because all these constraints and mechanisms been built and architected within the visa system. Anyway, there are likelihood that people get it. Again, that's for those one who are extremely high profile and could provide extremely high return and value in order for the company to actually sacrifice and go through all these procedures. Anyhow, should you have more question or query, more than welcome to leave a comment right down below. And I see you next video. Goodbye.